Welcome back, people. It's Menenberg, part 2 of the LEQ overview. In our previous video, we looked at how the long essay question fits in the overall AP exam. Remember, it's about 40 minutes of the time, and it's actually only 15% of the score, but that's not insignificant, and if you do it well, you're going to do better on the other parts as well. The other things we talked about were some basic tips for writing the LEQ, and we broke down a sample prompt. We're going to work with that same prompt and look at outlining that essay, as well as just some basic organizational things we want to think about as we write this essay. People, it's hard. It takes practice, and I need you to stay with me. Otherwise, your LEQ is going to catch you off guard, and you're not going to know what to do. But don't worry, people. I got this. All right, let's outline the essay together. Now, here is a fact. Most students don't do this. I bring that up because it's not that most people don't do the LEQ well. Most of my students actually do pretty well at the LEQ, but nationally and globally, LEQ is a major struggle. It's worth 6 points. National averages is somewhere in the neighborhood of a 1 out of 6. Not great. And a lot of that becomes because they don't plan. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have any outline, they don't have any semblance of facts that they can rattle off, and they just go and spit out all their words on a page. It doesn't look good. They're not going to get the points. Outline the essay, people. All right. It only takes 2 to 3 minutes anyway. I'm not looking for a 3-page detailed outline. You just got to get some nuts and bolts so you have that plan. And more importantly, as we talked about last time, so that you know what you know about this topic. If you don't know a lot, move on to the next topic. Remember, you have 3 different prompts you can choose from. Pick the one you know the most about. All right, it's not graded. And then when I say that, I mean like they don't read what you don't want them to read. So if you're done writing your essay and you got this big old outline, cross it out. No one's impressed. They're not grading it. Just move it aside. All right, let's try this one. Again, same prompt as last time, but I'm going to reread it so you are familiar again. Because of its size, wealth, and cultural innovations, China had a significant influence on its East Asian neighbors in the years 1200 to 1450 CE. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which Chinese cultural traditions led to change in other East Asian societies in that time period. Okay, got it? We have a really good idea in our brain, I'm sure. Let's move on. Mind you, this is a suggested structure, people, what I'm about to show you. It's suggested. You don't have to do it this way. As I said in the previous video, your structure that the College Board only requires is that your thesis is at the front end or the back end of your essay, first or last paragraph. That's it. Other than that, you can have 2 paragraphs, 10 paragraphs, 40 paragraphs. It doesn't matter. Okay, I'm making a recommendation here. You don't have to do it this way. This is a way that I think, though, will make you very successful, so pay attention. All right, first paragraph. You're going to put your contextualization, and mind you, you should have your LEQ rubric out so these words make sense and you know what they are. Also, I'm going to have separate videos for most of the points of the LEQ rubric, so we'll watch those later. For now, though, the first paragraph, contextualization, thesis. You can put the thesis at the front or the back of that paragraph. I don't care. But you got both of them in there, and this is a great way to go. So in this prompt, you're basically answering the question, what happened in China that allowed it to develop its culture the way that it did? You want to talk about this. Remember, contextualization just tells us what is going on in the world of this prompt. How did we get here? Okay? And as we talked about in the previous video, this is a causation type prompt, so it's worthwhile to explore the cause of the cause. Chinese cultural traditions caused these effects in East Asian societies like Japan and Korea. But how? How did we get there? How did China get that level of influence? How did we get that sway that they had? We need to talk about that for contextualization. That's just one way, but it's a really easy way to get it. Okay? The other thing you want to include, of course, is your thesis. As I said, you could put it at the beginning or end of this paragraph. It doesn't really matter. But you're going to pick 2 East Asian societies. I'm going to go with Korea and Japan. And I'm going to also, in that thesis, determine which one was more influenced or more significantly influenced by Chinese cultural traditions. My last piece of my thesis is my line of reasoning. And again, I'm exploring this thesis thing in a later video, so stay tuned for that. But I'm basically going to say why. So like, let's just say I'm arguing that Japan was more influenced by China. I'm going to say, here's why. That's my line of reasoning. That's in my thesis. Now, before we get to the other body paragraphs, let me just say, you could also just make your thesis its own paragraph. Oops, we went a little too far. You can make it its own paragraph and put it at the front of your essay. That's fine, and then do a contextualization paragraph. I've seen that, and then go into your body stuff. No problem. I'm making this suggestion, put it together. It makes the flow a little bit more natural. Next, we have our first body paragraph. Thing 1, for you Dr. Seuss fans out there. Thing 1, we'll talk about Japan. So what you're going to do in your outline is you're just going to list a few things or a few ways that China influenced Japan through cultural traditions. Not that hard. But again, at this point, if you don't have 1, 2, 3 things that were influenced by China, either don't pick Japan or don't pick this prompt. One of those has to happen though. Next, same idea with Korea. Just rattle off some stuff that they were influenced culturally by China, and you have your outline. The last 2 paragraphs don't have to be their own paragraphs, but I'm suggesting you put them as their own just so that you're sure that you're checking that box off on the rubric. And the first one is complexity. Paragraph 4, complexity point, also known as analysis and reasoning 2. I'm going to spend a lot more time in a separate video on what that actually looks like. I have that video for the DBQ. It's the same point for the LEQ, but I'm going to do it again. So watch that on your own time. But the other thing is that you have at the end a conclusion or a thesis paragraph at the end. I talked about this earlier. It's just a way of ensuring that you clearly state what your argument is for the reader. Remember, by the time you've written your whole essay, there's a good chance that your argument might be slightly different than you first planned it to be. And so it's worth just taking a minute or two, just put it in paper again. They read all of it, and they will grade the better one. They'll give you the benefit of it out there. Most students tend to get to that argument later in their writing, so it's worthwhile to make it its own paragraph just so it's set apart and clear to the reader, this is my thesis. Another way to do this, so this is the Menenberg way. Like, I like bullet points, that's me. Another way to do it, though, is to make some sort of table. This is just a different form of an outline, in which case you'd put Japan and then Korea, here's the cultural influences, here's the effects of that influence, and then maybe here's some differences between them. Okay, that's totally fine. And again, they're not grading this, so you can cross it off or just leave it. They're not grading it. But it just helps you in your mind set up what you're going to say in your actual essay. It's a really, really helpful thing to do. Next, moving on to our body paragraphs. Now, this is the English teacher in me. This is not required, but again, the easier it is for the reader to understand what you're saying, the more likely you're going to get those points that you want to on the rubric. Starting with topic sentences. My goodness, people, even in my English assignments, many students don't put this. But for your history essay, put it in there. Chinese cultural influence on Japan were blank and blank. Then you rattle off all the evidence in that paragraph. Same thing for Korea. Just make it so clear, so spelled out for them that they'd have to be hit by a 2x4 in the back of the head for them not to see what you're trying to say. Make it clear with the topic sentences. Then, obviously, after the topic sentence, you're going to include that evidence. You're going to rattle off a bunch of evidence. We'll explore what constitutes evidence in a later video. For now, just understand that it's not just about listing a bunch of facts. It's about tying those facts to your argument. That is what analysis and reasoning is. Okay? So that's why you follow your evidence with analysis through phrases like these. Okay? So this is similar to this and this because this differs from a positive impact was this because this is significant because you're demonstrating that you understand how this evidence not only proves your argument, but is also relevant to the topic of the prompt. If you just list a bunch of facts, I hate to say it, but look, you're not a history writer quite yet, probably, and I'd much rather just read a textbook. And that's to say, as a history teacher, I don't love reading history textbook. I'm going to be honest with you. They're not really a page turner. Your history writing, probably not quite as good as that though. So don't just give me a bunch of facts, tie it to your argument. All right, I mentioned this again, 100% not required to have a conclusion. They don't look for it. They only look for it, the last paragraph, to have a thesis. It doesn't have to have a thesis, but if your first paragraph doesn't have a thesis, then your last paragraph better have that thesis. And that's why I say conclusion might be worth your time if you have it. Okay? Couple quick observations for those of you who are following along with the rubric. First, you see a lot of words repeated in the rubric, starting with responds, 2 times in that rubric. Again, if you are not responding to the prompt, if you are not responding to all parts of the prompt, you are not going to get points on this essay. You're not going to get the points you want to get. You might get 1, maybe 2, but you're not going to get them all. You got to respond to all parts of the essay. That's why I emphasize these words because they're there multiple times. They don't put them there for funsies. Next, prompt. Weird. 6 points on the rubric, and there's 6 times you see the word prompt. Do you think it's important to break down that prompt and understand what it's asking? Yeah. Next, argument. Would you believe that you can only get about 2 points on the actual rubric if you don't have a thesis or an argument? The only line that doesn't have argument is contextualization and evidence point number 1. We'll talk about those more on later videos, but thesis is interchangeable for argument. You're going to see that throughout the essay, but your thesis is imperative to nail. You got to have it there, and if you don't have it, it's going to be hard to prove something if you don't have anything to prove. Okay? Evidence, 3 times that's in there. You got to have evidence, people. You can't just make a wild claim without backing it up. Otherwise, you're going to be something like a politician, maybe. I don't know. Okay. In our next video, we are going to dive deep into the thesis because, as I just said, it is the most important point on that LEQ rubric. If you don't get it, it's going to be rough waters for you sailing on this LEQ journey, and I don't want to see that happen to you. You're better than that. All right, people. Until next time, this is Menenberg saying, life is about choices. Thank you very much.